Okay, here's a look at one of our next kingdoms. Where we've covered our two bacterial kingdoms. We've looked at our protista kingdom. Now we're going to be getting into fungi. All right, what are fungus? How do they work? Characteristics, basic structures. So here we go. The fungi is known as the laziest kingdom, and we're going to get into why they're dubbed that particular title. Okay, so our fungi here are our first um, solely eukaryotic organisms. Remember, our bacterial kingdoms were only prokaryotes. Our protista kingdoms, we could have prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Okay, as far as single-celled versus multi-celled. But here's where we're first focusing on a kingdom that is just made of eukaryotic organisms. They are heterotrophs, and they do have cell walls. So the fungi are going to join um, the bacteria kingdom as far as organisms that have cell walls. Remember the protists that have cell walls are going to be the algae. So there are some types of protists that have cell walls. And then we're looking at fungi also have cell walls. So the eukaryotic, heterotrophic, they have cell walls. And there's always an exception to the rule, but all of them are going to be multicellular except yeast. Yeast is the only single-celled fungus in the fungi group. Their cell walls are not like plant cell walls or even bacterial cell walls. They're made of chitin. Okay, however you want to say that, I say chitin, but that is the that complex polymer that forms their cell wall. Um, chitin is also the material that is going to help form the exoskeleton of insects, but we'll get to that when we talk about insects. But it is one of those complex polymers in the carbohydrate group. All right, so some basic function of, or basic structure, excuse me, of our fungi. They have structures called hyphae. Okay, these hyphae are very, very thin filaments that make up the overall body of the fungus. They have structures called mycelium, which are sort of like the roots of the fungus. Okay, they're just a tangled mass of hyphae. They cover a very large amount of surface area. You will find the mycelium down in the soil, or if they're growing out of a decaying or decomposing organism, you will find the mycelium amassed within that decaying organism. And then you have the fruiting body. The fruiting body is what we see. That's the part that holds the reproductive structures. It's the part that grows out of the ground and or dying organism. So here would be your fruiting body that we see. The mycelium would be the root-like mass of hyphae that would be growing inside the soil or inside the decaying organism, okay, helping to break it down. And then the hyphae themselves would be just those thin filaments that you could find within the fruiting body and within that organism itself. So here's a nice picture. All right, it's a nice visual to give you an overall labeling part of the of a general fungus. Okay, the fruiting body being the part that grows out or that we see. It contains the reproductive parts of the fungus. The internal part of the fruiting body is made of the hyphae, so those thin filaments. The gills, which are going to be underneath this cap, are where the reproductive parts of a fungus is going to be. Here's the stalk. The stalk is going to also contain hyphae. And then the mycelium, this huge network mass of root-like hyphae that grow either, like I said, from the ground or into the ground or into the dying or the dead decaying matter that the fungus is helping to break down and decompose. So what would happen is the nutrients would be absorbed through the mycelium up through the stalk, okay, into the fruiting body. And then those nutrients that pass through all the hyphae will eventually make it to the reproductive parts to supply energy, fuel, oxygen, all the things needed um, for the fungus to reproduce and grow. So a nice visual. Um, the mycelium, the mass of the fungus that usually can be found within dead organic material or in the ground, it can live for many years. Okay, so it can actually, even if you don't see the fruiting body, okay, so in this picture, if you actually don't see that fungus growing out of that dead matter, the mycelium can still be there for many many years before while they're in search for some type of food source. Now our decomposers, this is part of our fungi kingdom. Okay, remember there are detrivores. That group of organisms, and then of the detrivores, the decomposers is where the fungi would fall. Um, and most of the fungi are going to live close to the ground. They're going to be responsible for breaking down dead organic matter and help recycling the nitrogen and the phosphorus and carbon, uh, all of those components that make up that dead organic matter, recycling it back into the system. Their digestive processes are external, so they don't have an internal digestive system. They use their mycelium to excrete chemicals that help externally digest the dead matter, so then they can absorb it through their hyphae. Um, they work very closely with bacteria in this process. So not only will you find um, a, a a fungus that is responsible for decaying a particular dead organism or the dead organic matter, but you will see that there will be bacteria working closely together with the fungus to help break that organic matter down. Um, the way reproduction works with a fungus or with fungi is they can reproduce sexually and asexually. So they can reproduce both asexually and sexually. Through asexual reproduction, if a fungus is going to go through its part of reproduction, and when it's going to use asexual reproduction, it's going to produce spores. The spores are the cells that can regrow into new organisms through mitosis. That's all they need is mitosis. So when the spores of a fungus are produced, those spores, they only need a food source for energy, but then they can just grow through mitosis, reproduce. They can be they're so small and lightweight they can be carried on the wind. So when the spores are produced, they can be carried on the wind to different areas for to find um, the favorable habitat for growth. They can also be spread by animals. They can germinate, and we use the word germinate, which means they can access a food source and start to go through mitosis and grow. So they can germinate as long as they have enough food, there's plenty of moisture, and the temperature's correct. Okay, the big thing with fungi is they do need food and moisture. It cannot be a dry environment. It needs to be a moist environment for the spores to grow and for the to the fungus to survive and to thrive. Now, sexual reproduction for a fungus, there's no male or female fungi. Okay, so there's no characteristics that would determine whether or not you're looking at a male or female. They don't have those particular um, distinctions. Okay, so you have one fungi, it's hyphae. All right, how sexual reproduction would occur is the hyphae has positive and negative charges, and what they would do is these positive and negative charges would be drawn together like the ends of a magnet. When they meet, they would fuse. Once they fuse, they would produce chemicals to start to form a zygote, and then within that zygote, they would transfer pieces of genetic material from the two mating fungi. Okay, then it could grow by mitosis or through spore production and meiosis. So that is just a very straightforward process on how sexual reproduction within fungi work. Now, some common types of fungus, the zygomycotes. okay, or zygomycotes, however you want to say it. This is the common mold. All right. Do you remember when Alexander Fleming was working with bacteria and fungus started to grow on one of his petri dishes? It later led him to the accidental discovery of penicillin. All right. It was just a common mold. It was one of these types of fungus that was growing on that. You get these common molds in a lot of food growth, right? If there's some warm temperatures, if there's plenty of moisture that's developing, bacteria will get involved as well. But then you get fungus that gets involved, and that's how you get molds, this type of fungus, to grow on fruits and vegetables and breads within your pantries and refrigerators. The ascomycotes, all right, are the types of fungi that form sacs or bags with their structures. Okay, then here are a few pictures that you can see the sac-like structures of these particular fungi. The basidiomycotes, um, these would be mushrooms that we see growing on, say, the sides of wooded areas like trees, puffballs, okay, types of mushrooms like in this picture that they puff out air, and then in those air are their spores that catch on the wind, and then that could spread through for reproduction. Stinkhorns here in the bottom, bird's nest fungus, bracket fungi. Okay, so these are all the normal types of mushrooms that you see growing out of the ground. These are the common types of basidiomycotes. And then the deuteromycotes, these are the fungus that's involved in our food production. Okay, how we get blue cheese and how we get taste in like tartar sauce or things like that. Soy sauce would be made from our deuteromycotes. Now our fungus do have relationships with other organisms, and here's just an example. This is a type of mutualistic relationship between fungus and plant. Okay, the lichen and the microhyzy fungus. They're both benefiting, and what's happening here is that the fungus is helping to break down the dead matter from the plant and taking in food for itself. The lichen is also getting the leftover food source from that, and then the fungus is actually getting protection. It's being able to blend in. It's getting a kind of a camouflage protection, okay, in this type of relationship. As far as diseases go, with fungal diseases, diseases caused by a fungus, they can cause plant diseases. They can also cause human diseases, and here's some examples. Athlete's foot, I mentioned that in one of our previous topics. Ringworm. Ringworm is a type of fungus disease. Yeast infections. Thrush. Thrush would be almost like a molding type process forming on plants and vegetables, and then mildew. Okay, those are all types of fungus-based diseases. All right, so some interesting facts about a fungus. The largest living organism on the earth today is a fungus. Okay, this culture, this Armorelia bulbosa, it's found in the northern part of Michigan. It's about 1,500 years old, and it can cover about 35 acres of land. So one of the largest living organisms found on the planet. In North America, we eat fungus and we spend a lot of money. You can eat truffles type of fungus, okay, and that's going to go for more than $1,000 per kilo, which would be about 450 per pound. Our pizza. Think about all the pizzas that you eat, okay, or the breads that you eat. The bread is going to have yeast, which type of fungus in it. Some of us even like mushrooms on our pizza. Certain our cheeses, like our blue cheese, for example, not all of our cheeses, but our blue cheese is going to be fungus produced. And then we mentioned antibiotics and how our fungus help lead to development of antibiotics.